Welcome to the AT Center at TCNJ. My name is Vanessa Lombardo, and we are excited to bring you this AAC webinar series. This is our last session titled AAC Best Practices. This webinar is presented by Sarah Brown, a New Jersey licensed and ASHA certified speech and language pathologist specializing in augmentative and alternative communication. These webinars are made possible through our partnership with the New Jersey Department of Education, Office of Special Education. The statements issued by our guest presenters do not reflect the stance of the NJDOE OSE. Please use your professional judgment when implementing strategies and resources within your practice. To learn more about the professional development opportunities offered by the AT Center at TCNJ, please visit us at atcenter.tcnj.edu.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our last webinar, AAC Best Practice. My name is Sarah Brown, and I will be presenting tonight. So if you are not new to these webinars, then you already know what to do. I like to start each presentation getting to know who's in the audience. So please help me get to know you. In the chat, if you could tell me your name, where you're from, and what brings you here tonight. So are you an SLP, future SLP, a teacher, or a parent? Let's see, I'm gonna open up my chat so I can see. And I know that we definitely have some people who have been here before, so that's wonderful. ABA teacher from New Jersey, Haley, New Jersey School SLP, wonderful. SLP second course here, preschool SLP, Sherry SLP from Cape May County. Welcome, Jacqueline SLP, New Jersey Public School. Okay, we have some school-based SLPs in Somerville, New Jersey. We have a teacher. Okay, a SPED teacher. Wonderful. Dorothy, Highland Park. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Okay, so now that I've gotten to know more about all of you, I'd like to introduce myself and share more about my background before we get started. So I am duly licensed to practice speech language pathology in New Jersey and North Carolina. My husband and I recently relocated to the Charlotte area. I am certified by the American Speech Language and Hearing Association. I've presented statewide on AAC, and I'm a member of the New Jersey Speech Language and Hearing Association, as well as the North Carolina Speech Language and Hearing Association. I've also served as the chair for the Interprofessional Autism Committee for the New Jersey Speech Language and Hearing Association. I've practiced in a variety of settings, including early intervention, public and private schools, higher education, as well as private practice, where I'm currently at right now. And my areas of interest include AAC, of course, autism, sensory integration and processing, early language development, and neurodiversity affirming therapy. And then on a more personal note, my husband and I are expecting our first baby the first week of June, so coming up here pretty soon. And I'm looking forward to the future and speaking not only from a professional standpoint, but from a parent's perspective as well. And just our learning objectives for tonight. So as a result of this webinar, participants will be able to identify at least 3 foundational AAC best practices that support communication access for AAC users, explain the importance of aided language stimulation, also known as modeling, and learn 5 strategies to support AAC users as a communication partner. So I encourage the audience to ask any and all related questions in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat for questions and addressing them during the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. So just an important note on language and terminology. During this presentation, you may hear the term AAC user based on feedback from AAC users that this is a preferred term. Non-speaking or minimally speaking instead of nonverbal. The term nonverbal can have a negative connotation and may imply a lack of language or ability to understand. AAC device or AAC system will be used instead of talker, based on feedback from AAC users that this is also a preferred term. And generally, when speaking to a group or presenting, I will defer to using identity first language based on the preferences of many autistic adults, meaning I will say autistic person instead of person with autism. But when working one on one with students or their families, I will ask what they prefer. So when in doubt, it never hurts to ask. Language matters and shapes perceptions. Terminology is constantly changing, and it's important that we listen to and include the opinions of people with lived experience. So, what is AAC? AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. It refers to tools and strategies that can enhance speech or provide a completely different means of communication. It falls under the broader umbrella of assistive technology or the use of equipment, tools, and strategies to improve functional daily living in people with various disabilities and limitations. Augmentative means to supplement or add to someone's speech. So it includes things that can make your message more clear to a listener, such as using facial expressions or gestures. Alternative means instead of. So it includes things that replace spoken language, such as a dedicated communication device, which can only be used for communication purposes, or an iPad with a communication app. This is when we have an iPad that can be used for many different things in addition to communication purposes. A key takeaway that I hope you leave here tonight with is the emphasis on the augmentative definition. Most often, when people think of AAC, the image of a non speaker comes to mind, but we can't forget that it's also for adding to existing speech. AAC can be very flexible because communication needs are very different from person to person. Some people use AAC all day and every day, while others use it only in certain situations. So for those of you that have already attended any of the previous webinars, this will be a bit of a review, but I want to make sure to explain what unaided and aided AAC is as a foundation for anyone attending for the first time tonight. So AAC is generally broken down into two categories known as aided and unaided AAC. So under unaided, it's also known as no tech. It does not require any external tool, and it is communication done solely with the body. For example, gestures, facial expressions, sign language, and body language. Under the aided category, we have light tech, mid tech, and high tech communication. And these are methods that require external tools or devices. For example, core boards, GoTalk, an iPad with a communication app, etc. So a pro or strength in using unaided AAC is that it is always available and no external tools are needed or required. However, a limitation is that it may not be understood by everyone and requires fine motor skills or physical ability to perform certain movements. For example, many daycares and preschools incorporate sign language into their daily routines and songs. However, I have had parents who say that they see their child signing but do not know what they're saying when they come home from school. A pro in using aided AAC, depending on the type, generally is that it can be personalized and it's portable. A con or limitation is that some forms can be expensive, need charging or a power source. Also, ongoing training and technical support may be required. So here are some different visual examples within each category. Under unaided AAC, as I previously mentioned, this includes forms of communication that only require the body and no external means. For example, sign language, facial expressions, pointing, and body language. Under light tech, these are paper-based tools to support communication. Even though they are paper-based, they are considered light tech because they still required some technology to create them, such as a printer. Some examples I have here are an alphabet board, a high contrast communication book, and printed visuals for a choice board. Under mid-tech, we have examples such as an 8-button AAC, a Big Mac, which produces a single message, and a 2-button AAC. When we think of mid-tech communication systems, they are battery operated and require a recorded voice. Typically, they have a single overlay or static display, which means that all the symbols are constantly displayed on the device. And the last category is high-tech AAC. High-tech refers to tools with higher processing capabilities and synthesized speech. Synthesized speech allows users to create messages in the moment instead of relying on a pre-recorded message. It includes dedicated devices, which can only be used for the purpose of communication, and iPads or tablets with the communication app installed. An AAC user that has a communication app on an iPad is still able to use that iPad for other purposes beyond communication. You may have heard of the communication apps such as Proloquo to Go or TouchChat. For dedicated systems, you may have heard of the device companies such as Tobii Dynavox or PRC Saltillo. An AAC system can include all types of AAC and should be individualized based on the strengths and support needs of each child or adult. One thing that's important to note is that there's no hierarchy when it comes to any AAC. Light tech is actually also referred to as low tech, but as a field, we're shifting away from using low to light because many people assume low tech is associated with low functioning, which couldn't be further from the truth. AAC is a powerful tool that can open up communication and support language development for individuals with various communication needs. However, every form of AAC, whether it's high-tech devices, communication boards, or gestures, has its own limitations. No single method works perfectly in every situation. That's why a total communication approach, which encourages the use of multiple modes like speech, signs, symbols, and technology together is recommended. It gives individuals the flexibility to communicate in a way that works best for them across different environments and situations. So who can benefit from AAC? AAC can benefit anyone who has difficulty with spoken communication. This includes individuals of all ages and with a wide range of abilities or diagnoses. For example, children with developmental disabilities, acquired disorders, neurological conditions, and individuals with temporary communication needs. It's important to note that a diagnosis alone does not automatically mean that an individual needs AAC. Similarly, just because a person can speak does not mean that they would not benefit from AAC. So when we talk about best practice in AAC, I think it's important to address some common myths and misconceptions that often contribute to beliefs about AAC and why it is not being implemented sooner, if at all. And one of the most persistent myths is the idea that AAC should only be introduced after all methods have failed, essentially as a last resort. This misconception can significantly delay access to communication for individuals who would benefit from AAC, often during the most critical periods of language development. When AAC was first emerging in the field of speech-language pathology, it was considered a last resort and only to be used when every other method and strategy had been exhausted. However, when we know better, we do better, and research, including foundational work by Romsky and Sevcik, 2005, has shown that AAC can and should be introduced early in tandem with other speech and language supports. When AAC is embedded into intervention from the start, it can reduce frustration, increase expressive opportunities, and promote overall communication development. It's essential that we shift our mindset from viewing AAC as a fallback option to recognizing it as a proactive, evidence-based tool that opens up communication opportunities. So myth number 2, AAC will inhibit spoken language. A common fear among caregivers and even some professionals is that using AAC, whether it's a speech generating device or sign language, will decrease motivation to speak or somehow replace or inhibit the development of spoken language. This myth has been thoroughly disproven, and in fact, the opposite is true. AAC does not hinder speech development, but actually, in many cases, supports it. So, research consistently shows that access to AAC can actually increase verbal output for many users. When children are given a reliable means of communication, the pressure and frustration around speaking often decrease. This reduction in communicative stress creates more positive communication experiences, and that's exactly the kind of environment that fosters the development of spoken language. AAC acts as a bridge, not as a barrier. It gives children a way to communicate effectively while speech and language skills are still emerging. For some, spoken language may eventually come more fluidly, and for others, AAC remains their primary mode of communication. In both cases, AAC plays a vital role in reducing frustration, increasing independence, and enhancing social interactions. So, one of the most harmful misconceptions in AAC is the belief that a child must demonstrate certain skills, such as joint attention, cause and effect, or have a certain cognitive level before they can be considered a candidate for AAC. This gatekeeping approach is outdated and not supported by the current evidence. In reality, there are no prerequisite skills required to start AAC. Communication is a basic human right, and every individual, regardless of age, diagnosis, or ability level, deserves access to a robust system to express themselves. Waiting until a child meets arbitrary milestones before introducing AAC often results in missed opportunities to support their communication development at a critical time. This readiness model delays intervention and reinforces this misconception that AAC is only for those who have already demonstrated certain skills, when in fact, AAC is a tool that helps develop those very skills. AAC can and should be introduced early and proactively. Many children begin using AAC without fully understanding symbolic communication, and that's okay. Just like spoken language, AAC is learned through modeling, interaction, and repeated exposure over time. Children do not need to prove they are ready to communicate. We need to presume competence and give them the tools to do so. As professionals, we must shift away from this wait and see approach to a model and support approach. Our job is to make communication accessible, not conditional. So now we have the AAC prompting hierarchy. So the least to most prompting hierarchy in AAC is a structured approach used to support communication by providing increasingly supportive prompts only as needed. This technique encourages independent communication attempts while still offering scaffolding as necessary. Research supports a least to most approach to prompting in order to prevent prompt dependency. Prompt dependency occurs when an AAC user relies on communication partners to prompt or cue them before they ever initiate communication. When an AAC user becomes dependent on prompts, this prevents them from becoming independent, autonomous communicators, which is definitely what we want to avoid. So just a few important notes. There are a few variations of this prompting hierarchy. And even though prompting hierarchies have been a staple in special education and the speech therapy field, many studies now support aided language stimulation or modeling that we will be discussing later in this presentation as a primary intervention for AAC learners. I also have an asterisk next to physical prompts, which includes hand-over-hand prompting. Physical prompting should be avoided as much as possible and only be done in special circumstances when motor challenges occur. We never want to promote unsafe practices or make a student think that it's ever okay for someone they trust to put their hands on them, to make them say or do anything. When a message is understood, we should stop any kind of prompting and honor all communication. So the 3 types of prompts that I have in bold at the top allow individuals to communicate a preferred message. The final 4 at the bottom are prompts that require AAC users to complete a specific skill and therefore lose autonomy in their message. So I encourage you to proceed with caution using these prompts. I also would like to point out that the direct model listed here is asking a student to imitate or produce a message that was modeled, and this is different than modeling without expectation. So how do we use a least to most approach? We identify the target word, phrase, or communication function being taught. We create a motivating activity or environment that incorporates the target word or phrase. We model without expectation the use of the targeted word or phrase. We teach in a natural setting. And then we provide prompts in a sequence from least amount of support to the most amount of support. I do have some tips and strategies for using this hierarchy effectively. The first being wait time. We should be giving AAC users at least 5 to 10 seconds to process and respond before intervening. Second, we also want to be using aided language stimulation, better known as modeling, to teach new words and various communication functions on the AAC system during everyday interactions. And we want to do this without requiring immediate output. Third, we should always be intentional with prompts. Only add a level of support when truly necessary, and always fade prompts as soon as possible. Fourth, we should observe and reflect often. Ask yourself, am I prompting because the student needs it or because I'm uncomfortable with silence? Let the child lead. And fifth, vary your cues. Avoid using the same prompt every time. Mix verbal, gestural, and visual supports based on the context and individual needs of the learner. And my final tip is to celebrate all communication attempts. Whether they use one word, select the wrong button, or use a gesture instead of their device, respond as though their communication mattered, because it does. So when talking about AAC vocabulary, oftentimes we hear a lot about core and fringe words, which we will be talking about tonight. However, there are 2 other main factors that are equally as important, and these are motor planning and grid size. So motor planning refers to the ability to execute movements automatically, which is vital for AAC users to communicate efficiently. There is a ton of research behind motor planning, and that is why many AAC applications, such as LAMP Words for Life, Proloquo, and TD Snap, keep core vocabulary in consistent locations, which helps to build reliable motor patterns, and in turn, enhances communication speed and ease. So take a moment to think about how frustrating it would be if every time you went to use your phone, all of your apps were in different locations, or anything in your home that you keep in the same spot was moved each time you went to use it. This is a similar frustration to what AAC users may experience if we are not prioritizing motor planning or planning ahead to ensure that icons will remain in the same locations. Motor planning is also a concept I like to discuss with other professionals who think that a child isn't ready for AAC because they're not yet able to discriminate pictures. Many AAC users actually rely on motor planning instead of picture discrimination, and that's completely okay. On the topic of motor planning, this is why I personally do not use PECS. In addition to it being a compliance-based approach, it also does not support motor planning, which, as we just discussed, is a huge component for AAC success. Our goal or intent should never be to test AAC users or make communication more difficult than it likely already is. So the next concept I'm going to talk about is grid size. And grid size refers to the number of buttons on a page. This is an area that I see many well-intentioned professionals struggle with. I oftentimes see very small grids with only a few choices for food and high interest items. And while this may be benefiting the professional for data purposes, it is truly doing a disservice to the AAC learner. If there's one thing that you take with you after tonight, I hope that it's this. AAC users do not need to prove themselves by showing that they can discriminate between a few buttons on a page. We just discussed motor planning and how it is vital to AAC success. When we start with only a few icons or a very small grid size, we are actually making it harder for the AAC learner to explore language and develop new skills. A small grid size means that the AAC user will have to navigate through many pages and different folders. In addition, once the AAC user is showing proficiency with the few icons on the page, the grid size will need to change, and that also means that the locations of the buttons will change, which is not supporting motor planning. In fact, I have seen cases where a student abandons their device or becomes extremely frustrated when the grid size changes because everything they learned now has to be relearned. Of course, there are always considerations that we need to take into account for AAC users with physical or vision difficulties. If possible, it's always recommended to consult with an OT and PT to gain their perspective and expertise in gross and fine motor skills, as well as visual perceptual skills. I also encourage you to consider tools such as mounting systems, a stylus, or key guard for AAC users that may have difficulty physically accessing the device or accurately selecting buttons. For AAC users with visual impairments, we can consider adjusting the contrast between page buttons and the background, or also adjusting the space between buttons as well as the font size. Another recommendation I have, instead of starting off with a small grid size, is to hide icons that are not relevant at this time, or to reduce visual overwhelm or fatigue if you do suspect that that is occurring. That way, the position of the icons do not change, and over time, you can unhide the icons as their vocabulary continues to grow without compromising motor planning. So moving on to AAC personalization. So AAC personalization refers to the process of tailoring an AAC system to reflect the unique identity, needs, and communication contexts of an individual user. AAC personalization ensures that an AAC system is functional, meaningful, and emotionally resonant for the person using it. Personalization is crucial for AAC buy-in, early acceptance by the AAC user, and long-term success. So what does AAC personalization include? Voice personalization, selection of a voice that aligns with the user's gender, age, and personality. Visual personalization, including custom images such as real photos, cartoons, or symbols that the user may prefer. You can also make choices around color schemes, font sizes, and a layout that supports visual or sensory needs. Grid size and layout. We just talked about this area and how we need to be supporting motor planning and planning for vocabulary growth in the future, while still supporting and considering where the AAC user is currently. If and whenever possible, if an AAC user is able to contribute to personalization, this is highly motivating. I once had a young adult student who worked on a sketch with his mom and brought it into me for me to program how he wanted his music folder to look. That input was so valuable and included him and his family in the process. Next, we have access methods, and we briefly touched on this area in the previous slide, but how the AAC user is able to access their device, of course, will contribute to buy-in and use. Do we need to incorporate a switch, a key guard, maybe adjust the dwell time on an icon for students that are selecting buttons too fast and need more support with control? For environmental considerations, what vocabulary and phrases can we add specific to school, home, work, or the community that would be helpful? I currently have a student on my caseload who is a young adult and no longer in school. So I didn't feel that the school folder and vocabulary was appropriate. And instead, we added a job and ADLs folder, activities of daily living. I worked with mom to include what chores she does around the house to make sure she had access to that vocabulary and so that mom could model during those activities. For cultural and linguistic relevance, let's make sure that we incorporate cultural norms and routines. An example of this is in my students' breakfast folder. I worked with mom to add foods such as dosa and moved less relevant foods or added them to a more general folder that were not a part of their everyday diet. And for vocabulary, we're going to talk a little bit more about core and fringe in an upcoming slide, but these are great places to start if you are overwhelmed with the programming aspect of AAC. Too often, I see students who have had a device for extended periods of time, but don't have these common folders personalized. Even if you don't see a student opening these folders yet, being able to model meaningful vocabulary contributes to AAC buy-in. This is something that, when possible, you can collaborate with the teacher and caregivers to gather more information. At the beginning of the school year, I will have parents fill out an About Me and send pictures so that I'm able to program this vocabulary into their devices. So why is AAC personalization important and considered to be a component of best practice? AAC personalization promotes autonomy and identity. AAC users can express their own preferences, thoughts, humor, and personality. It also reduces the chance of the device as being viewed only for work or school. It enhances motivation and engagement. AAC users are more likely to use systems that include vocabulary they care about and that make communication feel relevant rather than generic or teacher-led. It also supports real-life communication. AAC personalization allows for genuine participation in conversations about hobbies, routines, and social relationships. It also aids in natural peer interaction and classroom participation. Think about morning meeting and greeting peers. If a student does not have that vocabulary programmed in their device, they are missing an opportunity to interact and participate. It also improves learning outcomes. So context-rich vocabulary enhances language acquisition and generalization. It also engages both the AAC user and their communication partners in meaningful dialogue. It also promotes buy-in from families and communication partners. So personalized systems invite collaboration with caregivers, educators, and therapists, which also helps increase carryover and consistency across environments. So another best practice for AAC implementation is the use of core vocabulary. Core vocabulary comprises of 80% of what we say, and it only consists of about 200 words. Core words are high frequency, functional words that can be used across a wide variety of contexts. Although core vocabulary accounts for a majority of spoken communication, oftentimes core vocabulary is not explicitly taught to AAC users because these words can be hard to teach. Unlike nouns, most core words are not picturable. We can use symbols or photos of most nouns to teach the meaning of words and represent that meaning on an AAC system. But teaching words such as it or is more complex. So moving on to fringe vocabulary, which consists of low frequency, highly specific words that are unique to particular topics, activities, places, or individuals. These words provide important detail and personalization to communication. Fringe vocabulary primarily consists of nouns and specific content words, enabling AAC users and communication partners to talk about their favorite things, experiences, and people. Research has shown that personalizing AAC systems with fringe words leads to higher rates of spontaneous communication. During one of the previous webinars, I received a question about which types of words we should be modeling, core or fringe, and the answer is both. A balanced system and combining core and fringe vocabulary allows AAC users to build more complete and meaningful messages. When modeled together, both types of vocabulary support language growth, literacy development, and social interaction. So now we're going to talk about another component of best practice in AAC called aided language stimulation, which you may be more familiar with its other name, modeling. So modeling is when a communication partner points to or selects symbols on an AAC device or core board while simultaneously speaking. For example, if saying, "Do you want more juice?" a communication partner might select more and juice on the child's AAC device as they say that sentence. So, something that's important to note is that when modeling, we do not need to select every word on a device that we're saying, but it is important that we're still speaking with grammatically correct sentences. Modeling is the foundational input needed before output can be expected. Without it, AAC systems are often underused or abandoned. And with modeling, AAC users can develop more natural, functional, and independent communication skills. So, just a few more points on why modeling is important. So, language input precedes output. Just like children developing spoken language in a typical manner, they hear thousands of words before speaking. AAC learners are no different and need to see and experience how language works using their AAC systems before they're expected to use it themselves. So, number two, modeling supports receptive language growth. Even if a child is not yet using the AAC system expressively, seeing it modeled helps them understand the meaning of symbols and language structure over time. Number three, modeling also supports expressive language use. Modeling provides AAC users with concrete examples of how to request, comment, ask questions, and use a variety of other communication functions. Number four, modeling also demonstrates real-time use. By modeling AAC during naturally occurring activities, such as meals, during play, or various activities in the classroom, AAC users learn how to apply language in functional and social contexts. And number five, modeling helps build communication partner skills. When caregivers, educators, and peers model language, they become more responsive and supportive communication partners, which is critical for long-term AAC success. At the bottom here, I have some research to support modeling as an evidence-based strategy. So research by Fallon et al. 2001 and subsequent studies emphasize that learners need robust input in AAC in order to develop spontaneous generative language. Davidova 2025 found that modeling increased a range of communication functions, including greetings, requesting, and commenting. And finally, research by Wei and Bhattacharya 2023 showed that consistent modeling during virtual schooling improved AAC use, even if children with significant physical limitations. So, how to be a good communication partner? We want to create naturalistic opportunities for communication. This means that we want to set up daily routines, activities, and interactions in a way that encourages communication without pressure. Communication should never feel like a test. Try to think about moments in a day where a student may need to request something, comment, or share an idea. Creating opportunities for communication matters because AAC users need real, motivating reasons to communicate. Practicing in meaningful contexts builds confidence and supports generalization. We want to acknowledge all communication attempts. So, what this means is that we want to respond positively to any effort to communicate, whether it's through gestures, facial expressions, partial words and vocalizations, or use of a speech generating device. So, why does this matter? Acknowledging all communication attempts reinforces that communication is meaningful and builds trust over time. So, over time, this encourages increased communication attempts and more consistent AAC use. So, for example, if a child presses an incorrect button or uses the wrong word for bathroom, respond to the intention, not the mistake. Oh, I think you meant the bathroom, and select bathroom on their device. Don't make them repeat error free or withhold access because this can lead to frustration and possibly reduce a child's motivation to use their device. Number three, we want to attribute meaning. This is when we interpret what an AAC user is trying to say, even if it's unclear, and assign meaning to the behavior or expressions. This helps build understanding between the communicator and their partners and reinforces that their behavior or message means something and is being heard. Number four is expansion. This means when an AAC user selects a word or a phrase, you model a longer or more complete version on their device. This is also a language building strategy that is used with children who are not AAC users. This strategy matters because it teaches grammar, sentence structure, and vocabulary growth and context. For example, if a student says cookie, I might model yummy cookie or want cookie or even big cookie with their device to provide that next level up from what they're currently doing. And the last strategy I have here is recasting. And recasting is when we restate or rephrase what an AAC user said using correct grammar or a more complete structure without correcting them or interrupting. Similar to expansion, recasting provides natural language models that build grammar and syntax without discouraging communication. So, for example, if a student says want ball, you may say, you want the ball, let's get it, and then proceed playing. So, just some do's and don'ts of AAC. We want to presume competence. We need to believe that the AAC user has something to say and can learn language, regardless of their current communication level. Do model AAC for a variety of reasons, not just to request. Use the AAC system yourself while speaking to the user. This shows how to use it in real conversations. We want to provide wait time and access to robust vocabulary. So we want to wait 5 to 10 seconds after asking a question or making a comment to allow AAC users to process language and respond. Offer systems that allow for full language development, not just basic wants or needs. Remember, there are no prerequisites to AAC. We want to provide frequent opportunities to communicate. So create authentic, motivating reasons for the AAC user to use their system during everyday routines and interactions. And number 5, we want to respect and honor all communication attempts. Acknowledge and validate any form of communication. This includes gestures, facial expressions, vocalizations, etc. And remember that speech is not superior to other forms of communication. So moving on to our AAC don'ts, we never want to take away the AAC device as punishment or even if it's being perceived as a distraction or non-functional. AAC is the student's voice. It's not a privilege. It should always be accessible. We don't want to limit vocabulary to only needs and wants. We need to make sure we're providing access to a balanced vocabulary of core and fringe words and modeling use of a variety of communication functions throughout the day. Number 3, don't only use AAC during speech sessions. AAC must be used across the day in all settings and with a variety of communication partners in order to be effective. Most students only receive speech therapy twice per week for 30 minutes each. Think about how long it will take them to become proficient AAC users if those are the only times they're using their device. Number 4, don't assume a user is not ready for AAC. This goes back to presuming competence and the fact that research shows that AAC can be introduced at any age or ability level. It's never too early or too late. And number 5, don't force AAC users to use only one modality. We all use multimodal communication, and a total communication approach mirrors this natural pattern. AAC users should be provided the same right as well. A total communication approach is recommended to allow individuals to use all available methods of communication to express themselves and to be understood by others. So just a few key takeaways for tonight. AAC is for everyone. Presume competence. Presuming competence means approaching every individual, regardless of disability, diagnosis, or current communication abilities, with the belief that they are capable of learning, understanding, and meaningfully expressing themselves. This mindset is foundational to AAC best practice and effective AAC implementation. Personalization and motor planning matter. Every communicator is unique, and vocabulary should reflect this. Personalization supports engagement and social connection by allowing users to talk about things that matter to them. Just like typing or speaking, AAC users often rely on motor patterns to find and produce messages. When icons remain in consistent locations, this reduces the cognitive load and can improve communication speed. Changing page sets and rearranging buttons disrupts motor patterns and can set users back in their learning and possibly contribute to device abandonment in the future. And number 3, modeling is essential for AAC success. Many AAC users are expected to use their AAC device with little to no demonstration, something that we don't expect with spoken language. Just like children developing spoken language learn to speak by hearing spoken language all around them, AAC users need to be provided with the same opportunity to see others using AAC meaningfully and consistently before they're expected to use it. Remember, language input precedes output. So thank you so much, everyone. We do have a survey that will be going out in the chat. Your feedback is greatly appreciated and helps me improve for future presentations. And once you complete this, you'll receive your certificate of completion for attending tonight's webinar. And if you do have additional questions after the Q&A segment or would like to get in touch with me, this is my email. You can also contact me on my speech therapy account as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah. These presentations have been so insightful and informative. We're very lucky to have you. We're going to put that link to the evaluation after we do the Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A portion, anything and everything. And I actually got one, so I'm going to start it off with one question for you, Sarah. What can I tell other professionals who believe that we should simplify a device to make it easier for the individual to learn?
So that is a really good question. So let's see. So while the intent behind simplifying a device is often to reduce cognitive load, research shows that limiting vocabulary too much can actually hinder language growth. All children need access to a rich vocabulary, even if they're not using every word yet. And this is how we support motor planning that we just talked about and long-term success. So sometimes if that isn't clicking for some individuals, I like to give the comparison of how a typically developing toddler learns to talk. Do we only provide them with access and repeat the same 5 words? No. So we expose them to rich language and presume competence that they'll learn and grow into it. And AAC is no different.
Awesome. We have a few questions in the chat here. Judy wants to know, how can I support a child who is using their AAC to STEM? I don't want to take it away, but it sometimes feels like they are not using it productively or at inappropriate times.
Yeah, so this question we've pretty much gotten across the board in all of our webinars. And I can understand, trust me, I've been there when you see a child who's stimming and you're talking to them, you're trying to redirect, and it doesn't seem to be working. But I encourage you to look at try to find the function behind the behavior. Are they doing it because they are exploring the device? How long have they had that device? If they're not a new AAC user and they're just constantly stimming, do they need to are they dysregulated? Do they need some sensory input? Are they bored? Are they looking for a form of distraction? So trying to find the behavior behind that is important. But again, it is their voice. We never want to take the device away, even if it seems to be a distraction for them or other students. And we also never want to turn down the volume either, because that defeats the purpose. So trying to get behind the function of the behavior, and then also treating it like we would a child who is using spoken language, right? So children often get off topic, they blurt out when they're not supposed to in the classroom. So kind of setting that boundary like, hey, we're in lesson time right now, we can chat later. So you're still acknowledging what they're saying, like, hey, I hear you, whatever button they're pressing. I hear that you're saying this, but we're actually in science right now. We need to talk about science, and then kind of redirecting them to a science folder or whatever you're talking about. So definitely getting behind the behavior. Like I said, if they're looking for a distraction, if they need some sensory input, sometimes taking a little break and going for a walk can help regulate them. And then if it is consistently persistent, some of our students do have difficulty with impulse control and executive functioning. So that would be something else I would talk to the team about if it's persisting.
Definitely. Another question with a little background. I have a student who prefers to search for words rather than go through the folders. I continue to model going through the folders, but wanted to know if this should be discouraged.
So I am so happy you asked that question. And I have had a student that did that. And in my professional opinion, I think it's great if they're searching for words. I know it may take a little bit longer, but we want to promote, again, it is their voice, and we need to provide wait time. So we're also promoting literacy. So if they're looking to, search for the word and type that in, even if it takes longer, we want to encourage that. That's actually a really good thing.
Just a little shout out. Someone said, thank you, very informative. And I feel so much more comfortable with assisting my students with the AAC devices after attending these seminars. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. And hopefully, I don't know if that was a teacher that said that, but hopefully you have a good relationship with your SLP, because that really makes a huge difference. I'm not currently working in the school setting, but when I was, me and the teacher were like this. We were very tight, and it made such a big difference. So if you have those good relationships with other professionals and feel comfortable, going to the SLP or even asking them, hey, like my staff's really struggling, can you come in and push in and show them how to use this, is really beneficial. So thank you for that input. I appreciate it.
All right. A question from Kylie. Last summer, I worked at a special education school as a paraprofessional. How can I help a student learn words from their AAC if they're new to the concept of an AAC device?
Yeah, so great question, Kylie. The best thing you can do is to model. I think like I said, we have this concept. I'm not sure if it's because students are, on devices and know how to use YouTube and all those kind of things, but I think we associate going on social media and movies and things like that with knowing how to use a language system. And that's just not true at all. So if a student is new to the device, Kylie, I recommend that when you're talking, you are modeling as much as possible. As much as you can throughout the day in different settings. I know sometimes it's easier than others to do so, but there have been times that I pushed into music, and when they would do repetitive songs, I would model that same word throughout music. Snack time's a great time. So just honestly, any time that you're able to model and not expect them to immediately push an icon or imitate you. That's the most important part. Is it's perfectly okay for you to model something, a peer's name, the next routine and action, and not have them immediately imitate you, because they're still getting that input and still learning.
Great. This next question is a great question and also a hot topic in the speech world with Gestalt language processing. How do I convince caregivers and team members that AAC is still beneficial for someone who can speak?
Okay, so I think it helps to point out to caregivers and other professionals that we all use multiple forms of communication, and framing AAC as just another layer of support, not an indication that we're giving up on speech. I also find it very helpful if you're able to record videos of your sessions, or if you're a teacher in the classroom, kind of showing how they're using their device. Um, it can be very helpful for parents to see how their child's communicating in the classroom in real time. I also think educating on communication functions, so like beyond requesting, like social greetings, commenting, answering, and asking questions, is important, because a lot of times, they may see like, oh, like they're able to ask for the things that they want and need. But if you're not a speech therapist and if you're not a teacher, sometimes we need a little bit of reminding that there's so many other reasons to communicate. So kind of pointing out that, hey, yes, your child's really great at asking for things that they want, but they really struggle in these other areas. So this is going to provide them that extra support.
Great. Another question, how can we support paraprofessionals and other educators in implementing AAC best practices?
So paraprofessionals are often the ones working most closely with AAC users throughout the day. So it is critical that they feel confident and supported. My suggestion would be to start with clear, simple modeling strategies and train in short, digestible chunks during natural routines such as snack time, transitions, electives, or play. I like those times because often they're seen as downtime, and that's when I've noticed devices being less used. I also like to hang up modeling reminders and cheat sheets for the classroom. And most importantly, you have to have a good foundation and relationship with the para to get that buy-in. If you start off barking orders or constantly correcting them, they're less likely to go along with your instructions. And this is not something that's mandatory, but just something that I've done in the past that I found to be very helpful. In the past, I've had trainings on AAC devices, and I would bring in coffee or bring in donuts and just let them know, like, hey, I really appreciate you. So I know something as simple as that seems so silly, but forming that relationship and those bonds with those paras and letting them know that, hey, you are the backbone and you are the student, like the closest with the student. So I really appreciate all your work with them. And then a last suggestion I have is to frame AAC support as part of their existing routine, not extra work. Reinforce that they are a vital part of the child's communication team and the child's communication development, and deserve professional support in that role. And just let them know that your door is always open to answer questions. So hopefully, if you are a para here tonight or a teacher, like I said, I hope you have the support of an SLP that makes you feel like you can go and ask them questions, because as you can see, we have many SLPs here tonight. So there's even other SLPs that need to really gain more of an understanding on AAC. It is a very complex topic.
For sure. A question in the chat. There is a school of thought that screen time can cause ADHD. Can an AAC device have negative impact on a child's attention span?
So that is a great question. And that is something that I have been seeing floating around. And ASHA, I believe they put out a statement on this that AAC and use for communication is not the same as screen time for video purposes or YouTube. So they're absolutely different things. And communication is essential, so they're not in the same category, even though it is still screen time.
Awesome.
Great question.
Another one, what do I do if an AAC device is becoming a distraction for one of my students and their classmates?
So we kind of touched on this earlier, and again, if I knew the student, it's a little bit better to kind of give a little bit more information. But I would say that it's important to get behind the behavior. So, is this something that they're doing all day, every day? Is it something that they're doing right after lunchtime or at a specific time during the day? So, taking data on how often they're doing this is important to see if it is something that's like specific. Are they anxious? Are they bored? Is it every day during science because they hate science? That can be important to kind of figure out. And then, like I said, treating it like a child who's using typically developing spoken language. Hey, we're in science right now. We can chat later. So you want to always acknowledge what they're saying. So let's say they're stimming on the word, I don't know, pickles. That's the first thing that came to mind. Hey, we can talk about pickles later. But right now we're in science and we need to focus or we need to listen. So acknowledge the response. Try to get behind the behavior if you notice there is certain patterns. But then redirect them and just like you would any other child and say, hey, we're learning about science. But like I said, even if they continue to persist, that might be something you need to talk to the team about or the SLP. But we're never taking away the device, even if it is a distraction, and we're never turning down the volume, which is something that I've seen paras do. And we don't want to do that because we wouldn't do that with, a child who's using spoken language. So redirect, but never take away the device.
Great question. Okay. How often should students be using their AAC device?
So AAC should be available to students all day and every day across all settings, just like spoken language is available to a speaking peer. We should avoid that mindset that AAC should only be used during speech and be providing plenty of meaningful opportunities for communication throughout the day. And if you're a teacher or a para who is finding certain times to be, like I know gym time can be hard to use a device or sometimes on the playground. Again, hopefully you're able to brainstorm some ideas and just bring that to your SLP's attention so that hopefully she or he can help you think of some ideas of how it can be better implemented. Maybe they could even provide, a core board or something like that during those settings that are like high-tech devices are not as appropriate. But all day, every day.
Yes. Okay, does anyone else have any questions? You can throw them in the chat. You can raise your hand, put them in the Q&A section. Not seeing any right away, but as we do our closing, oh, I see one just now. Okay. How do you determine how big or small the grid size should be?
That's a great question. And that is something that is, it's not something I can just give you a general statement, but I would say that it's less harmful to start bigger than smaller. I've seen, like I said, I've seen cases where a student is like they have a very small grid size and it really doesn't leave them any opportunity to grow. So we definitely want to consider, like their vision, their physical capacities, their motor skills and things like that. But I would say it's better to start bigger, and then you can always hide icons and things like that versus starting smaller. Hopefully that answers your question. And also, if you do have access to working with an OT or PT and getting their input, or even the teacher's input, can be really helpful in determining that grid size as well.
Any other questions? Okay, if anyone thinks of any questions as we're closing it out, feel free to put it in the chat, raise your hand, like we said. And I will turn it over to Sarah Monaco.
Thank you. Thank you again, Sarah, for another great presentation. This has been such an incredible series, and I know that I've have so many takeaways and great ideas to implement with students. I'm sure all of our participants do as well. And I've seen a lot of names pop up at multiple webinars, so I know a lot of you have joined us for several of these, and we really appreciate your support. My name is Sarah Monaco, and I'm one of the faculty co-leads for the AT Center at the College of New Jersey. And again, we're so appreciative that you were able to join us this evening. We're going to put a link in the chat and ask you to complete a short evaluation survey. When you're asked to include the title of the event for the one that you attended, the one for tonight is AAC Best Practices. We need you to complete this survey so that we can send you CEUs or PDHs for attending tonight's webinar live. And we will start issuing those next week. So if you can, please complete the survey by the end of this week. Just a note for SLPs, these webinars are eligible for PDHs, not CEUs. There's a slight difference there, but they still count towards your certificate maintenance interval. And a link to more information about that is also in the chat. Also, a recording of tonight's webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel so that you can rewatch whenever you would like, or you can share with someone who might be interested. And we'll send out a link to the recording once it's posted. If you are interested in any further professional development or support, please contact us at atcenter@tcnj.edu. We can provide free professional development to all New Jersey teachers and educators that is tailored to your individual needs. So we can do workshops, we can do one-on-one coaching, technical assistance, small group discussions, really anything that you need in terms of assistive technology. We are happy and eager to support you with that. So if no one else has any questions, thank you again for joining.